And we continue with our live coverage here on NewsNation and The Hill on NewsNation as you continue to look live at Donald Trump, who has just left that New York courthouse guilty on all 34 counts. The 45th president of the United States now faces sentencing and a very uncertain future for Donald Trump for at least the next 42 days. The former president, the presumptive Republican nominee, emerging from court convicted of multiple felonies.
This was a rigged, disgraceful trial, but the real verdict is going to be November 5th by the people, and they know what happened here.
And a live look right now at the White House, which at this moment is not commenting, but the Biden campaign has a different message. See you at the ballot box. So what comes next as the former president of the United States is convicted, faces sentencing, and remains ahead in the presidential polls? Come on in. I'm Blake Berman. This is The Hill on NewsNation. They got a front row ticket on this day. Hanging out with us, Laura Fink, Democratic strategist, Nan Hayworth, the former congresswoman from the state of New York, Bob Cusack is the editor-in-chief of The Hill, and Aaron Perini is a Republican strategist. Hello to you all. Nice to have you all in on this truly historic day. Sean Spicer, Scott Bolden, Lee Zeldin, Max Rose, all going to be joining us soon. Connell McShane, Kelly Meyer as well. Bob, I think that sort of laid it out at the top, and now I'm sort of curious, as we sort of take all of this in and what comes next, what you make of what we just saw in Midtown Manhattan a little while ago.
What we saw was history. There's no doubt about it. But overall, Democrats need a conviction. We don't know if it's going to make a difference in this race, and certainly the indictments did not make a difference. Right. I think we're net positives for Trump. But Democrats, because Biden is struggling in states like blue states like Virginia and Minnesota, they needed a conviction. They got it. And the pollsters...
Do they need a prison sentence?
I don't think they're going to get one. Let's put it that way.
Well, we'll get there in a second. You know what I found so interesting, Aaron, and I know you've been speaking to folks on this. The Win Red site, which sort of raises money for Republicans, has crashed.
Yeah.
Overloaded.
Yes. This is a very kind of classic thing for Donald Trump. When there's a big news day for him, a lot of money comes in. I would not be surprised if this is not a historic fundraising day for the former president. I have friends who are Republicans and liberals who are texting me saying, I'm going to vote for him now and I'm going to give him money. This is bringing folks off the sidelines to the Trump team.
Still lots of questions, though. Your initial thoughts?
Yeah. It's not justice. It's lawfare. And polling has shown increasingly that the American public is actually factored in whatever this verdict would be, because they do think...
Two-thirds of the public already said it's not going to change their mind.
Kangaroo court.
But in an election where the margins matter, especially by maybe 5-6% in 5, 6, or 7 states, we don't know how this is going to play out just yet. But at least now we have somewhat of a scene of how the picture's painted.
Well, it ain't good, and all the money in the world is not going to help take away and wash away those 34 convictions. We know that these convictions were brought by a nurse, by a teacher, by a software engineer, by a banker. These are ordinary Americans unequivocally saying that Donald Trump is guilty of the crimes presented. This was a landslide verdict. It was not close.
All right, over to Lower Manhattan now. That's where we find, by the way, as we continue to keep our eye on Donald Trump as he heads back to Trump Tower. Connell McShane, anchor of NewsNation Now. Kelly Meyer, NewsNation Washington correspondent as well. Connell, I'll start with you. Set the scene. What's it like out there right now?
Well, it was interesting, Blake. We were on the air when the word came in that the verdict had been reached, but not when the verdict was read. And there was a noticeable buzz and a change in the atmosphere here on the narrow Center Street where this courthouse behind me, this old courthouse, the criminal courthouse in Manhattan, is located. So, the cops who are here and doing a great job of securing the area started scurrying around and tightening up security immediately. And you may have seen when I was on the air talking about it, there was a helicopter overhead hovering. So, yeah, people are on edge because I think a lot of people were surprised, quite frankly. Almost nobody we were speaking with expected this verdict to come this quickly. So as soon as it came this quickly, we knew that most likely there was either a guilty or a not guilty. Forget hung jury. That was out the door. So then we started wondering what it would be, and of course, then the counts came down. I will tell you now this, Blake. I've walked around outside in the last few minutes. There's a small park right across the street from the courthouse. You've probably seen the shots of it. We've been showing them, and others have as well. It's quite calm there. There's some Trump supporters. There's some anti-Trump folks. They're separated there by by police barricades, but there's not really much going on. People milling about, talking it over. There was some cheering and yelling at first, but not really much right now. It's a calm situation, which is obviously a good sign.
Kelly Meyer, you just texted me about a statement that's in. I'm wondering what you are hearing from Trump world.
Yeah, we saw some reaction pouring in just as the verdict was reached from some members of his team. Of course, they were saying, as they have been all along, even before the verdict was reached, that this was rigged, as we heard from the former president. We also were just getting this statement in from the former president. I could read a bit of it now. It's similar to his statements as he came out of the courtroom, saying, quote, "This was a disgrace. This was a rigged trial by a conflicted judge," he says, who was corrupt. Again, saying in this statement, the real verdict is going to be on November 5th. He keeps saying that this will be decided by those Americans going to the polls. Now, the scene around me here outside of the courthouse is some supporters of the former president walking by, taunting those who are in support of the verdict that was reached. Some are celebrating here. Those who support the former president are saying that basically that former President Trump just won the election by this verdict being reached here, finding him guilty on all 34 counts.
Okay. All right, Kelly Meyer, Colonel McShane live for us on the streets of New York. Barking dog behind you. Kelly Meyer, thank you so much. Appreciate it. All right. Come on in, Scott Bolden, former D.C. Democratic Party chairman, NewsNation contributor as well. Hello, Scott. Sean Spicer, hello to you as well. Of course, the former Trump White House press secretary, NewsNation political contributor. Let's start with you, Sean. Scott, I'll get to you on the legal front and reaction in a second. But, Sean, you heard Kelly there say some Republicans are saying that this is good for Donald Trump as it relates to the election. I wonder what you make of that and sort of what your ongoing or initial thoughts were.
Yeah, look, I'm not shocked by the outcome, but I'm disappointed in our judicial system. I think that Kelly's right. There's probably going to be a strengthening of the base. Donald Trump will politically benefit from this. We've noted the site DonaldTrump.com, his campaign site, has crashed. There is going to be an overwhelming response fundraising-wise to this. But at the end of the day, this is not good for America. The idea that this was such a flawed case, whether you like the guy or not, to see how flawed it was and to see the verdict come in the way it did is not good for our judicial system. This is lawfare at the worst.
Sean, hang around for a second. Scott, we have the sentencing is going to be happening 42 days from now, or at least is scheduled to. We'll see if it gets delayed on appeal, so on and so forth. There are felony charges for the former president. That brings in the possibility of prison. It's somewhere in the state of New York. Do you think that is where the judge is going to go? It's only one person who decides this from here on out. And that is Judge Marchand. Do you think that is where this goes, Scott, or do you think he avoids that and sort of puts stipulations on Trump in other ways?
I can't predict what the judge is going to do, but there are not many people walking around free with 34 felony convictions like Donald Trump has. And, the whole issue of the system being flawed and the case being weak, let me tell you something. It doesn't feel very good for any of us as Americans for a former president, as Sean was referring to be convicted of 34 felony counts. But you see, Donald Trump drives this narrative. And whenever he faces the civil and criminal justice system, right, it doesn't work out for him. And so now let me just say this before, Sean, you jump in.
Sean's already raising his hand, but finish your thoughts.
He has attacked Marchand's family, and your original question was, where is he headed? He has every right to sentence him to incarceration. I don't know what it looks like, but I got to tell you this, under the New York State sentencing guidelines and under the discretion of Marchand, he certainly has every right. And by the way, a grand jury, a sitting jury, a judge, several courts of appeals have all looked at this case. At any juncture, they could have dismissed this and said, no go. And at every juncture, they said, yes, go. And this is the result of Donald Trump's bad conduct, not because of a rigged criminal justice system.
Hey, Sean, I wonder how you think this is going to play out with the debates a month away. First debate.
I think that's an issue. The bigger issue right now, we just mentioned sentencing. July 11th sentencing. The Republican National Convention starts on the 15th. If Judge Marchand puts anything. I mean, first of all, let's just be honest. There are people, most of the people who commit felonies in New York City are being pled down to misdemeanors and let off the street. We see on social media every day the violence that goes on in New York City, and you're going to put this guy potentially in jail. Give me a break. I will tell you this right now. If Judge Marchand even goes close to that kind of a verdict, you guarantee a victory for Donald Trump on November 5th. But this is 4 days before the Republican National Convention starts, before the presidential nominee of this party formally accepts it. God bless you. You guys do that. Katie bar the door, baby. You've guaranteed his win in November. I guarantee it.
Scott, I'll give you the quick last word here.
Real quick. See, Sean and his Republican friends keep talking about politics and elections and so forth and so on. I talk about the criminal justice system and what Donald Trump is facing. That bifurcation, that demarcation, there's no intersection there. And so him looking at jail time is real, got nothing to do with politics or who wins this election. Nothing to do with it at all.
Okay. All right. We'll leave it there. Scott Bolden, Sean Spicer. We could do this another time, probably tomorrow or the many days and weeks after that until November 5th. Thank you both for coming on in. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
All right. Over now to the former Republican congressman from the state of New York, Lee Zeldin, and the Democratic congressman from that state as well, Max Rose. Lee, Max, thank you both for being here. Lee, I know that you're close to the former President Donald Trump, so let's start with you. Your reaction is?
Well, I mean, this was a weaponization of the criminal justice system. I don't believe that this case should have been brought in the first place. I believe that this is a sad moment for anyone who cares about our country. You could have some county attorney in some red county of Mississippi deciding to wake up tomorrow and go after President Biden on some charge and get some friendly judge and some jury from a very red county, and then you're going after Joe Biden. This is just a door that is getting opened that is very dangerous. This is third world country type stuff. I think that the fact that the jury instructions were coming out at the end where, because you have to prove that there was an underlying charge. That's how this would get elevated from a misdemeanor to a felony. And the jury instructions weren't even telling the jury that they all have to agree on what the underlying charge was. They don't have to identify what the underlying charge is. And President Trump never had an opportunity in advance to know what that was, to cross-examine witnesses on it, to present his own witnesses on it. And that's just one example of many of how this trial went. And I think a lot of people are upset, and they see it as a political persecution.
Yeah, I was texting with Mae Mailman, friend of the show, former White House attorney. She posted many bases for appeal thanks to the crazy judge, in Mae's words, end quote. You can obviously see where this is going on the legal side. Max, I wonder, from your perspective, hearing Sean say that Donald Trump's website is down, hearing Aaron Perini say that WinRed is overloaded on the fundraising, does that concern you at all?
No, look, this can't be about politics and should never be about politics. It's great to see my friend Lee Zeldin in this conversation, and I think that we share two really strong principles. One is an absolute commitment to our Constitution and to law and order, and the second is actually a belief, yes, that this is a sad day. But I believe that this is a sad day because it is very clear that the Republican Party has put their entire weight behind now a convicted felon. And it is absolutely so sad that the leadership of the Republican Party now believes in law and order for thee, but not for me, as if the system could be momentarily rigged to the point that even jurors themselves are biased. This harkens back to the day when it was Southern segregationists that said actually that Northern juries couldn't actually arrive at a fair case in a fair trial. We have to believe in our system, and we have to believe in law and order. That is what Lee ran almost a very successful gubernatorial campaign on, and what the Republican Party has purportedly been behind for years. So I would urge them to stay consistent.
Lee and Max, as you might imagine, we're moving through some things here. I appreciate the time and the perspective. We'll have to leave it there. Lee Zeldin, Max Rose, former congressman, both from the state of New York. Thank you both. Can we show those live live pictures real quick because Donald Trump, I believe, is returning now to Trump Tower or somewhere close to it. If he emerges from the vehicle, of course, we will show it. If he says anything, of course, you will hear it. This happened. We got the news of this as it is now 6:15 here on the East Coast, 3:15 out west on NewsNation. And we got this news at about in the 4 o'clock hour earlier today that the verdict would be coming. The judge was about to actually send the jury home for the day. They would normally do that at around 4:30 Eastern. Then we learned there was a verdict. Now we know it is guilty on all counts, all 34 counts for the former president, Donald Trump. The first time a former president has been on trial, the first time a former president has been convicted. Donald Trump, live right now in New York, walking the streets. Let's turn the audio up for a second. So as you might imagine, a somewhat rowdy scene there on the streets of New York City as Donald Trump, the last we will see of him on this day. As I mentioned, the verdicts came in and then it was read and guilty on all counts. And then Donald Trump emerged from the courthouse and gave these brief remarks. Listen. We don't have those teed up for you at the moment, but Trump basically said, see you at the ballot box, or the real verdict is going to come on November 5th. Come on in, Congressman Glenn Ivey. He is a Democrat from the state of Maryland, a frequent guest on this show. Congressman, thanks for being with us here on the Hill. The White House has not commented. The Biden campaign has commented, and their response, sir, was essentially Donald Trump, I'm paraphrasing here, all the things that you would expect them to say about Donald Trump, they also added, we need to win this, in their words, at the ballot box on November 5th. What do you think the response should be from President Biden, Congressman? Because he can't avoid this to eternity.
Yeah, I don't mind that approach. Saying that the focus is going to be on Election Day, I think is the right way to go for the Biden campaign. I think this conviction speaks for itself. I heard some of your Republican guests a moment ago, and it's disappointing to hear them disrespect a jury verdict in that way. To me, it's another chapter in the sore loser playbook that, we got from Donald Trump when he lost in 2020 and has continued on since. But I'm hoping that we can get back to the point where the legal system will be respected. And, like I said a minute ago, Biden's got to win the election at the ballot box. It's the only way to bring the country back together.
We're going to hear the message from Donald Trump. You know this, Congressman. He's been saying it day in, day out, week in, week out, month in, month out, that he believes this was weaponized against him, that this is a political persecution, and if this could happen to him, it could happen to you, is essentially the message from the former president. What concern do you have that folks out there might say, you know what, maybe he's on to something?
Well, I had a chance to hear his statement that he gave right after the verdict, and it was much of it demonstrably false. So, for example, he said that this was the Biden administration that drove this prosecution. Obviously, all of us know that that's false. This was a state prosecution that had no connection to Biden or the Department of Justice or anything at the federal level. And, I think it's pretty clear there was extensive evidence of guilt here in this case. Now, there are legal arguments to be made, and he'll have a chance to do those on appeal. And he has had his due process rights from start to finish here. But, look, the jury considered it. They seem to be very meticulous, asking to go back through testimony and then having the entire set of jury instructions read to them again. It looked like they were paying close attention and trying to be careful. So it is what it is.
All right, we'll leave it there. Congressman Glenn Ivey, down the road from us in the state of Maryland. Congressman, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Okay, we got a lot there. Heard from both sides of the aisle, former Congress, current Congress, et cetera. To the Republicans, the question of how are you comfortable standing behind a felon at the top of the ticket? You would say what?
I would say that for Republicans, the message is going to be that this was politically motivated and politically biased, that this is going to be overturned down the road, and that this was nothing more than political lawfare. That will be the Republican message, and it will be uniting. And the party's already united. And WinRed's back up, so anybody, they got the website back up and running. But for Republicans, that is going to be a very clear, consistent message.
Yeah, I would agree. Experts from across the spectrum of political opinion, legal experts, have said that this trial was rife with reversible errors. So we can't even.
It's going to be appealed.
Well, it is, but someone is not a felon, and Jim Trusty was pointing this out in the previous hour, unless and until the appeals course has been exhausted. And obviously, President Trump is going to be appealing. So he is not a felon. He is someone who has been convicted of a felony, but he's not a felon.
How does President Biden deal with this now? Because there's clearly two tacks here, right? White House, no comment. President Biden is, as is every president of the United States, the chief law enforcement officer of this country. There's no one above the president. The campaign, on the other end, is the one doing the fighting here. But the president cannot avoid this from here until November 5th. So what's going to be the response, when, in what form?
I think it's really going to be about the debate. I mean, you're going to have the campaign take a few swings, but you're going to have the White House say nothing, as they should. They should stay out of the judiciary and all of that, because it is not political.
The debate's a month away, though, right? So at some point, he's got to say something.
I think Joe Biden has studiously stayed away from this issue because he's the president of the United States, and that's the presidential thing to do, is you allow the judiciary to do their job, those 12 citizens to do their job. They've rendered an unequivocal verdict, and now the Republicans are united in opposing it, but they don't speak to the real substance of the issue, which is that Donald Trump was brought these charges by a grand jury. He was convicted of these charges by a jury of his peers, that there was enormous evidence that they brought that was substantive. So he has to deal with that now on the campaign trail. With those persuadable voters, then those 2%, 3% can make a real difference.
So, Bob, debate at the end of June.
Yeah.
Sentencing, as we have it today, in the middle of July, and the Republican National Convention starts 4 days after that.
Yeah. I mean, fasten your seatbelts. I think Biden is going to lay low on this as much as he can. I agree. He's going to be asked every time. At the same time, I do think that there's a good chance Biden will use this as bait during the debate. Because remember, in the first debate, Trump was overly aggressive, and that's part of the reason he lost the
last go-around.
The last go-around.
Right.
So I think that, yes, he has to weigh in, but I also think it would be wise for Democrats not to spike the ball too much, because that doesn't look good.
Right. All right. Still to come here from the Hill on NewsNation, Alvin Bragg, the district attorney who oversaw all of this, is expected to speak in about 8 minutes' time, give or take. Once that happens, we will show you his comments live. You are watching The Hill here on NewsNation, live in Washington, as we witnessed and watched an historic day in New York City. Welcome back here to The Hill on NewsNation. As it is 6:26 here on the East Coast, we continue to show you live pictures of New York City. Alvin Bragg, the district attorney, is expected to speak in about 3 minutes or so time. When that happens, we will take you live to Alvin Bragg. But before then, Sean Spicer, former Trump White House press secretary, NewsNation political contributor, host of the Sean Spicer podcast, come on back in as Alvin Bragg speaks, and I believe that's the live camera right there as we await his comments. What are you listening for?
I don't know. I mean, honestly, at this point, I don't know that I really care. What I care about is the process going forward, the appeal process. Look, I think from one attorney after another, Elizabeth Vargas had one on right before this show started. There are so many flaws in this case in terms of what was allowed to happen, the jury instructions, the idea that Brad Smith, the FEC former chairman, wasn't allowed to testify. I want to hear from the Trump side their path forward in terms of appeal. But there are so many things going forward. I don't really care what Alvin Bragg has to say at this point. I mean, I'm sure he's going to do a happy dance, but it's going to be short-lived. And there's no question about it. The number of aspects that this case is going to get sent up on appeal is going to be numerous.
So, Bob, you know Sean. Yes. I know Sean. I can sense frustration from Sean. And I think Sean sort of epitomizes how folks in Trump world feel at this point in time. How do you expect him to navigate this going forward? And
Well, listen, I mean, this was expected. Most people did expect a conviction. But at the same time, as you mentioned, he's still winning. I mean, Trump is winning.
In the polls of right now.
As of right now. So we shall see if that changes. But Democrats have been waiting for his polls to drop. It's been like waiting for Godot, and it has not happened. So we will see if this happens.
Are you worried? So every time there was an indictment in the primary, we're in the general, but every time in the primary, Trump's numbers went up and to the right. Do you suspect that happens this time around?
Look, no Democrat is relying on the legal system to
Sean, I'll get you in here, but
to
finish
help
your thought.
people to help Dems at the ballot box. Frankly, Donald Trump taking center stage is the advantage, and this is clearly in his head. So those are two advantages for Democrats, but that's a long, there's so much more. Donald Trump, again, continues to talk about himself, his legal problems, his legal bills, his injustices, and not about the American people. That is what Democrats are going to be talking about come fall.
Sean?
Look, there was a poll that came out of Roanoke College here in Virginia yesterday. It showed the race for president tied in Virginia, which is significant in itself considering how blue it's gone for Democrats in the last couple cycles. But the interesting thing that I took away from the poll was only 4% of Virginians were undecided. And I have a feeling that that is pretty similar when you look at many of the battleground states. So the question is, what's the effect that this is going to have? My guess is it's going to harden the resolve of many of the Trump supporters. You saw that tonight with the crash of the site. People are going to give money. They're going to say, I'm in. I've gotten more texts. Right. Aaron mentioned this at the beginning. I mean, you're going to get people saying, I'm in, I'm double down, I'm going to get off the sidelines. I think for a lot of people who might not have been fully on board, this is what's going to drive him into his corner right now and saying, I'm going out, I'm putting up a yard sign, I'm making the calls, I'm giving a contribution. But make no mistake, this strengthens the resolve of the Trump side.
So, Sean, as the former press secretary in the White House, you were the spokesperson for the campaign in 2020. What do you expect the message to be?
The message...
Because he still faces the possibility of prison. Like, you can't just sweep that under the rug, that's still hanging out there.
Yeah, the message is going to be what you've already heard from Donald Trump, that this was a sham, that this was politically based, that this is not law and order, and that they are going after him because he's standing in the way of Democrats going after the American people. And to Laura's point earlier when she was saying that this is all Donald Trump's going to be talking about, Donald Trump has been talking about this the entire time on the campaign trail, and he's been talking about the open borders, the failing economy, people getting left behind, and how Joe Biden is failing as president. He can do both, and he's been messaging on both, and it's been resonating in the polls.
What about her point, though, that both of these candidates are not liked. The approval ratings show that, Joe Biden and Donald Trump. And the thinking is the more one person is in front of the camera and talks, that might actually be a disadvantage, not an advantage. So what about, to her point, the idea of, well, if he's out there talking about this and not other issues, then maybe it backfires.
Well, I agree with Geraldo Rivera when he was talking with Elizabeth. President Trump has been, and I think he has been, more disciplined, if you will. He's an extremely intelligent and capable man, but yes, he has gotten hot-headed sometimes. I think he's been more disciplined this year than in previous campaigns, and I hope and expect that he will be able to continue that winning message. And I also want to point out, to Sean's point about, 4% of Virginians, I think some calculations, 45,000 votes decided the 2020 election. And that's what the Democrats are counting on.
I want to bring in Libby Dean. Libby was our producer, reporter who was with Donald Trump throughout the primary. Libby is outside the courthouse right now because she was our producer in the courtroom throughout this trial. Libby, I believe you were, and hello, nice to see you. Great work as always. So look, the reason why I set you up like that was because at this point, I know this from covering him. I'm sure you know this from covering him. You sort of get to learn a little bit about Donald Trump when you're around him, covering him day in and day out. You were in the courtroom today. As this verdict was read, and as Donald Trump reacted, I wonder what stood out to you.
Well, what really stood out to me was actually after the verdict was read, and that was when Trump exited the courtroom. He shook his son, Eric Trump's hand, and they went kind of back and forth in a little tug of war. The entire time, both of them staring at all of the press in the room. A really interesting moment, and quite frankly, the most reaction we've seen from Trump during the entirety of this whole trial. While the verdict was being read, Trump, no reaction, not even looking at the jury. But when the jury did go through and affirm that on each count it was their own verdict, Trump did glance over at the jury during that moment.
You know, Libby, I was kind of shocked, and I know you and I were emailing about this back and forth. I was kind of shocked. Donald Trump loves a big setting, the lighting to be correct, the audio to be perfect. I did not think that after a verdict, he would go to that hallway where it's not lit, the audio is terrible, and give a statement there. But he did. And I'm wondering if that sort of surprised you and what you think we will hear from Trump potentially on a much bigger scale going forward. Like what comes next for him?
Well, Blake, you said that it was kind of a dingy-looking hallway. I can confirm, considering I've practically been living in that hallway during throughout the last 7 weeks of this trial. But obviously, we saw those remarks after court, his typical end-of-day remarks. These obviously holding more weight than they have throughout the entire trial. But what we could see is some kind of presser. Nothing is confirmed yet. We are about to hear from DA Alvin Bragg, though, right down the street from me here, down from the courthouse.
All right, Libby Dean, our producer who's been alongside Donald Trump for many months now. Libby Dean, thank you so much. Appreciate it. Did that surprise you at all? I thought he would want to make like a big grand scene somewhere and not walk down the hallway with terrible lighting, terrible audio.
He's been doing it, though.
But yeah, he's been doing it, and he gets the first word. That is really
so he gets the front run, Alvin Bragg.
Exactly. Yes, he set the narrative fast and quick. That was a strong political move. Right.
So speaking of Alvin Bragg, as it's 6:35 here on the East Coast, we were expecting the DA there, the district attorney in Manhattan, to be speaking at about this time. He should be. Do we have those live looks? I think the camera's up right now. But we should be hearing from Alvin Bragg at any moment when that happens. And there you go. So this is what happens. A photographer goes up to the microphones, gives a mic check. Everything's all set. The DA will walk out here shortly. What do you think we hear from him? Because he put out a statement on social media, and it was just guilt. I'm paraphrasing here. He didn't spike the football. He didn't celebrate. He basically said guilty on all counts.
I think it'll be somewhat methodical. I mean, this was a big moment for him, obviously, one of the biggest moments of his life. I mean, I thought...
In a way, he delivered.
Yeah, absolutely.
He said he was going to do this, and he did it.
Right.
Whether you agree with it or not, he delivered.
He got the W.
Yeah.
And listen, I thought the prosecution's case in the beginning was strong, and it kind of ended weak. And that's why we were all wondering, well, is he actually going to get prosecuted in New York, of all places? And that's why it would have been a huge victory for Trump had he not. But I don't think it'd be wise for anyone to spike the ball, including him. But you said it. He got a huge win, and a lot of, I mean, listen, this case, I think, was the kind of the weakest case.
Right.
And it's the one case that's actually go forward before the election.
So there's the documents case in Florida, the election case, those two are Jack Smith, and then the Georgia case. Let me ask you something, all of you. President Biden cannot pardon Donald Trump for this. It's a state case. The Georgia case, President Biden cannot pardon him. It's a state case. You can pardon for federal. Should Biden consider that going forward? Pardons?
I mean, that's a really big question, and it's one that you really almost can't even ask the question of at this point because it's such a hypothetical. It's such a hypothetical. Like in so many ways, this is such a hypothetical that in order to try and for me to get in Joe Biden's mind about whether or not
you're not going to go there.
That's not a space I want to play in.
But it's all part of the question of and as we rightfully focus on how does Trump, how do Republicans, how do the campaign navigate the way forward. This is not a cakewalk for President Biden on how to go forward with this.
I think it's pretty simple. I think you allow Trump to be Trump. I don't think that he has showed a lot of discipline in terms of his previous campaigns. I think you allow him to take center stage and remind voters to take off the rose-colored glasses because you are going to get chaos and confusion. This is part of the Trump brand and the Trump package, and that's what Republicans are asking you to vote on. And I think when you see that, the question will be a little bit different than it is now in the absence of him in the spotlight.
But Americans have already said that this trial, in increasing numbers as this trial has gone on, that the verdict really isn't going to matter to them, that they're not impressed with the quality of the jurisprudence here.
Two-thirds have basically said it will not change their vote. It actually, when you look at the...
Including independents.
When you look at the poll from Quinnipiac University, which was out a week or so ago, it actually strengthened support among Republicans.
Yes.
Right? And I guess you can ask, it's a fair question, if this is a base turnout election, in a weird way, is this a net positive for Trump? But it's also an election in which we believe, and who knows what the prevailing thought, I think everyone would agree with this, is in the 6 or 7 swing states, it's going to come down to those 5, 6, 7% persuadable voters and how this plays with them there.
Yeah. Go ahead.
I was just going to say, all of this data is all can be affected by perception of Trump's strength. Strength is his brand. He did not look strong today. He did not look strong in the hallway. He didn't look strong with his statement. And that's something that he can't control. He has been Teflon up until now. I don't like to admit that, but it's the facts. This was a huge hit for him. It makes him look weak.
Does it?
But I think that this is already baked into the polls to the point that the former Congresswoman is making. The American people have already decided. And when November comes, they're not going to be voting about whether or not Donald Trump was convicted in New York on these 34 felonies. Right. They're going to be voting and saying it is 20% more expensive to go to the grocery store. It's 20% more expensive to put gas in my car. I can't afford the things that make my life livable, like car insurance and home insurance and saving for my children's education, not whether or not Alvin Bragg got the W today. Because Joe Biden is failing the American people, and that's what they vote about. They're not going to be voting about.
I actually agree with you, Aaron. I just wonder if they think the convicted almost felon is the guy to change the economy.
He's already changed it.
Look at what happened in that. That's what people are doing. They're saying, you know what? When President Trump was in office, I was doing a heck of a lot better. Yeah. And that's policy. And he represents better policy.
Here's what I noticed, because we just got a statement from the RNC, and they say the real verdict will take place on November 5th when Americans vote for a president they trust to bring down prices, secure the southern border, restore American leadership, and around the world make America great again. Why do I bring that up? Because here's what the Biden campaign has said. Donald Trump has always mistakenly believed he would never face consequences for breaking the law for his own personal gain. But today's verdict does not change the fact that the American people face a simple reality. There is still only one way to keep Donald Trump out of the office: at the ballot box. So you got both sides here basically saying, we'll see you at November 5th. I think for Republicans, Bob, it's fair to say they're doing this because they see somewhat of an opening. I think for the Biden campaign, they're saying, see you November 5th, because they kind of want to steer clear away from the verdict and say, no, we had nothing to do with this.
Yeah, I mean, listen, looking at my phone, odds makers in Vegas have moved the race a little bit closer to Biden. Okay. That's a net positive for Biden. That doesn't mean Trump is still favored to win. Right. But that's a key thing, because I agree that most people are not going to go to the ballot based upon this. They're going on inflation and immigration and those type of things. However, Harvard-Harris poll recently said 31%. I think that number is a little bit too high, but 31% still said they're weighing their options. And this could make the difference of 10,000, 5,000 votes. And that's exactly.
On the flip, let's just map this out for a second as we await Alvin Bragg, who should be speaking. He's about 10 minutes late.
Hey, NewsNation guys, it's 6:40. I got to go.
Is that Spicer? Sean, I think we just got you, but thank you, sir. Do you want to say anything before you go? I know you got to run.
He's got to dance.
No, I agree with what Aaron and Nan have been saying. I think this is going to be interesting, what they detail in the next couple of days in terms of their path forward. But I will be very interested to see whether Alvin Bragg tries to do a dance on this, because it's going to be a very short-lived one.
Okay. Sean Spicer, we'll let you run. We do appreciate the time. Thank you, sir. Sean Spicer, former White House press secretary, NewsNation contributor. Thanks, Sean. So what I was asking you is, let's map this out, because there's 159 days until November 5th, right? Let's just say Trump is not sent to prison, or it's appealed or whatever. For whatever reason, he's not sent to prison. In 150 days from now, when it's the end of October, early November, are folks are they going to remember this? Is this going to factor in positively, negatively, or is it going to be gas prices, border, abortion, whatever?
And the fact that Joe Biden just keeps getting worse every time you look at him.
Well, there's going to be, in theory, two debates, for better or worse, for either of the two candidates. Yeah. But two conventions, Democratic
until
and Republican.
President Biden says, I'm not debating a convicted felon.
I would not be surprised to see Democrats pivot their messaging to the felony convictions. And I know right now they're playing it safe.
In what way?
TV ads, text messages, emails, fundraising. They will do everything they can. And so right now they might be playing it safe and playing it cute and playing that they're not going to make this political. But Democrats cannot help themselves when it comes to Donald Trump. And they will take this bait, and then they will try and drive that as the message, the same way they tried to drive the message about democracy being at threat, about him being unfit for office. That's not what the people are going to vote on.
Joe Khalil is live for us. He is normally in the Capitol hallways, but Joe K for us today is at the White House. Joe, the dynamic is clearly notable. The White House trying to steer clear, letting the campaign do the work. I wonder, and I know you're at the White House, but you're always talking to folks up on Capitol Hill. I wonder what you're hearing.
Yeah, well, from Republicans, Blake, it's what you would expect. The only thing that surprised me was how many had these prepared statements, I guess, ready to go, because literally seconds after the verdict came down, you saw just a chorus of Republicans very close to Donald Trump, people like Jim Jordan, people like Speaker of the House Mike Johnson, all sort of saying the same thing, which is that they don't take this verdict seriously. They think it's going to get reversed on appeal. They said this is a banana republic. This was all but rigged, effectively. On the Democratic side, I've been a little bit surprised that there are not as many Democrats sort of taking victory laps. I kind of expected that was going to be the case today, and certainly there are some. But the tone that we're seeing more often from elected members now on the Democratic side is either just a Donald Trump is a convicted felon, or something along the lines of, this just proves that no one is above the law. And interestingly, I think that sort of vibes with the statement we got from the Biden campaign today, which is that, effectively, what really matters is the ballot box, not so much this decision, this verdict. Because if you want to keep Donald Trump out of the White House, you're going to have to do so at the ballot box, is the statement that the campaign put out. We are told today, being here at the White House, that it was not likely President Biden was going to come out and say something. However, we know he can't hide from these questions forever, Blake. So at some point, he's going to be facing reporters and he's going to be asked to react to this. And it will be interesting to see whether he sounds like some of the members of Congress that we've been talking about, a bit more stoic about it and reflecting what the campaign is saying.
Joe Khalil live for us at the White House. Joe K., thank you. Appreciate it. So let's keep up this live shot of the district attorney's office there in Manhattan, because this is kind of fascinating. Donald Trump has been convicted. All 34 counts. We were just talking about Alvin Bragg, said he was going to do it. He delivered. It looks like he's still going to try to make the case. He's got placards up there. That's one that I have seen. If the camera were to pan right, and this is one camera, the pool camera for all the networks, if that camera were to pan right, you would see another poster board up there with even more information. There's sort of a flow chart, I think. So it seems like, and there we go. They're not listening to me, but you can see it there. As they pull out, there's your flow chart on the right-hand side. It seems like he is still going to try to make the case. I guess this is where perception is the reality. I don't know.
Well, the integrity of the judicial system is at stake here, so he's throwing up his facts, and I don't blame him for that. I mean, the fact is this is now a contrast election. Donald Trump versus Joe Biden. It's no longer a referendum, which these poll numbers that we've been discussing, those are actually based on a referendum. Everybody was saying, like, what about Joe Biden? The exact thing that Republicans and my company in here included, and if I was you, I'd feel the same way, do not want a contrast election that centers on Donald Trump. And that, day one, is what we have.
So are you going to make it a contrast election, Republicans, between Trump and Biden, or are you going to make it a contrast election on Biden's performance over the past 3.5 years?
It's been overtly a contrast election. I mean, that's what folks are saying in the polling, Laura, is that they were better off 4 years ago.
Let me stop you here. Alvin Bragg, live in New York.
Good evening. First and foremost, I want to thank the jury for its service. Jurors perform a fundamental civic duty. Their service is literally the cornerstone of our judicial system. We should all be thankful for the careful attention that this jury paid to the evidence and the law and their time and commitment over these past several weeks. 12 everyday New Yorkers, and of course our alternates, heard testimony from 22 witnesses, including former and current employees of the defendant, media executives, book publishers, custodians of records, and others. They reviewed call logs, text messages, and emails. They heard recordings. They saw checks and invoices, bank statements, and calendar appointments. This type of white-collar prosecution is core to what we do at the Manhattan District Attorney's Office. In the 1930s, District Attorney Thomas Dewey ushered in the era of the modern, independent professional prosecutor. For now nearly 90 years, dedicated professionals in this office have built upon that fine tradition. A major part of our practice during that nearly 90 years has been public integrity work, including cases involving jurists, local and state electeds, public servants, and others. I want to thank this phenomenal prosecution team, embodying the finest traditions of this office: professionalism, integrity, dedication, and service. They are model public servants, and I am proud and humbled to serve side by side with them. The 12 everyday jurors vowed to make a decision based on the evidence and the law, and the evidence and the law alone. Their deliberations led them to a unanimous conclusion, beyond a reasonable doubt, that the defendant, Donald J. Trump, is guilty of 34 counts of falsifying business records in the first degree to conceal a scheme to corrupt the 2016 election. And while this defendant may be unlike any other in American history, we arrived at this trial and ultimately today at this verdict in the same manner as every other case that comes through the courtroom doors, by following the facts and the law, and doing so without fear or favor. I want to conclude by expressing deep gratitude to the NYPD and the officers of the Office of Court Administration for securing the courthouse, all of our safety, making sure the courthouse and all of the other matters that are important in their own right continued seamlessly. They will continue to be and have always been incredible partners. Thank you.
And do you plan to request a prison sentence? Donald Trump's multiple violations of the gag order that was in place should factor into that request at all?
The judge scheduled a sentencing for July 11th. We will speak in court in that time. He also set a motion schedule. We will speak in our court filings as we've done throughout this proceeding.
Donald Trump has repeatedly targeted you personally and members of your prosecution team. Do you have a response to the former president now that this trial is concluded?
I do not.
In February, you decided not to bring a case against Donald Trump. You criticized then. You criticized when you indicted him in March 2023. You criticized when people really started to understand that case. How do you think of all that now, seeing the result of that? Can you kind of put that in context of your personal history?
I did my job. Our job is to follow the facts and the law without fear or favor. And that's exactly what we did here. And what I feel is just gratitude to work alongside phenomenal public servants who do that each and every day in matters that you all write about and make the press, and in lots of matters that you don't. I did my job. We did our job. Many voices out there. The only voice that matters is the voice of the jury, and the jury has spoken.
Could I ask Mr. Steinglass, many people said the prosecution was masterful and flawless. Just want to know how you feel at this moment. Sorry. How do you feel?
Mr. Steinglass, I think some of you probably saw him speak for a little bit the other day. So he's done his job, as has this team. And he just told me, tell him how I feel. I think you said that. I will just say just enormous gratitude. You know, our system, I talk about the jurors at the beginning of my remarks. We have a phenomenal system. 12 everyday New Yorkers. They listen to the judge's directions. They follow the evidence. You saw them in court every day. They were careful and attentive. And so I feel deep gratitude to work alongside them, to be a part of this system. And I just want to echo that this is what we're doing every single day. I mean, during this trial, just this week, right, ghost gun indictment, Grimaldi's wage theft plea resolution, sex crimes, convictions, all sorts of work that's being done by phenomenal public servants. So we're before you today on this obviously consequential matter, but this is what we do every day. We follow the facts and the law without fear or favor.
If a jail sentence is in the cards, it is likely that Trump and his attorneys would seek a stay on enforcement of that sentence pending appeal. If that were the scenario, would your office object to staying the sentence? I'm
going to let our words in court speak for themselves when we get to the sentencing matter. I'm not going to address hypotheticals. They raise arguments, we'll respond. And I think your question really underscores an important point. This is an active, ongoing matter, right? We have other phases of this going ahead. We will continue to do our speaking about this matter, about issues like that in court.
From day one, kind of the viability of this case has been questioned in all sorts of media outlets, all over the place, including from the defendant himself. Can you respond to any of that, how you feel now that you've gotten the conviction?
So my response, again, is I did my job. And I think particularly I talked about the history of the office. My personal history, I started as a prosecutor in 2003 in the Public Integrity Unit in the New York State Attorney General's office. I served also in the Public Integrity Unit in the Southern District of New York. These are kind of cases I've done personally, and it's a hallmark of the tradition of this office that I'm proud to lead. And I don't want to go into the whole body of litigation, but we now have a federal court decision ruling on the legal theories. We had a state court decision on the omnibus motions. But most importantly, today we have the most important voice of all, and that's the voice of the jurors. They have spoken. Donald J. Trump has been convicted of 34 counts of falsifying business records. Thank you.
District Attorney, your office has been investigating this case since 2018.
Are you concerned about retribution if Trump is elected president?
You went to the Supreme Court twice.
All right, so you have been listening to Alvin Bragg, the district attorney there in Manhattan, sort of taking a little bit of a victory lap as we continue here on the Hill on NewsNation, host of On Balance, Leland Vittert. Hello, sir. A little bit of a victory lap there from Alvin Bragg. I mean, in a way, look, the federal prosecutors would not take up this case. They passed. They didn't touch it. Vindication for him there, in a sense?
Or his announcement that he's running for governor. I thought it was interesting, and you have to you realize this from having worked at the White House and other places. Yeah. You begin to focus on the phrase they say over and over again. Mm-hmm. He said over and over again, I lost count at about 8. Did my job. Right. Okay. What job is that? And I think there's a lot of New Yorkers who've been victims of criminals that he has...
would say, do your job. Right. You could say Michael Cohen admitted to stealing, 50 grand, 20 grand. Right, are you going to go prosecute Michael Cohen?
You can do that.
Job. You can make those arguments. I think it's fair.
The police officers who were beat up by illegal aliens that were let out by Alvin Bragg's office, did he do his job? A lot of New Yorkers who've been victims of violent crimes by people who've been let out by Alvin Bragg's office and his policies. Did he do his job? I get why he was saying what he was saying, and he was trying to have the humble brag, right? Right. That is a very dangerous thing to do.
So he was asked there, and this is what I took note of. He was asked if he objects to staying the sentence. So sentencing is on July 11th, and there's the belief that if the Trump team appeals, which they will, obviously, that you could then not go forward with sentencing until all of the appeal process is done, just like what happened in the Jussie Smollett case and how all of that shook out. He said this is an active, ongoing matter, so he didn't necessarily commit to that as a possibility, but we can see that as the road that the Trump legal team is going to take.
There's going to be serious political pressure on Alvin Bragg. from both sides. One, people are going to want him sentenced, but also, and we're seeing this in real time, right? The website for Donald Trump's campaign donations crashed because so many people were donating. There's going to be a lot of polling. There's going to be a debate between now and July 11th. And you can imagine Democrats are going to look and see how this is playing politically. And there's going to be a lot of pressure on Alvin Bragg, either A, go in harder and push for a tough sentence because they think it's working, or fear, perhaps, among Democrats, and we'll see if this plays out, that they went a little too far, and that this is backfiring, and then what to do about that.
And if he's not sentenced to, and let's just say they do go forward with sentencing in 42 days, and let's just say that he's not sent to prison, then there's the real question, as you bring up, of could this potentially backfire? I mean, you talk about Trump's website, WinRed, which is the consortium, essentially, for Republican donations went down, too.
No, exactly. And that is a real thing. And boy, did the Republican National Convention in Milwaukee just get interesting, right? It was going to be 4 days of boring.
And this is after the first debate, July 11th, after the first debate on June 27th, I think, and the RNC, which starts July 15th, and then Trump, in theory, is up there July 18th.
Right. And so this all of a sudden really changes things. And I think that as much as you want to say what something means in the moment, we really don't know. We really don't know what it's going to be like in terms of galvanizing his crew, meaning Donald Trump's, and also what this is going to mean for Democrats.
And I